What no one knew was that years ago, she saved that bear when he was just a dying cub. And now, he'd tear the world apart to protect her. But how did a wild predator become her fiercest protector? The truth is far more unbelievable than any rumor ever told. They said she was crazy, a recluse living deep in the forest, keeping something wild behind her cabin doors. But no one knew the truth. Not until the day a man tried to grab her wrist during a heated argument in town, and a black bear, full-grown, eyes blazing, burst through the trees with a roar that shook the earth. The man stumbled back, face drained of color, as the beast placed itself between him and the woman, teeth bared, unmoving. That was the first time anyone realized this bear wasn't just wild, it was hers. But the real story? It didn't start with fury. It started with a helpless cry in the woods, a shivering ball of fur, and a woman who couldn't walk away. This is how a simple act of kindness turned into a bond so powerful it made a bear her lifelong protector. It was early spring when Ava first heard the sound, a faint whimper, like a cry swallowed by the wind. She was hiking alone, as she often did, to clear her mind. The woods behind her late grandmother's cabin had always brought her peace. But this day felt different. The air was heavy, the silence unnatural. She followed the sound off the trail, past a cluster of birch trees until she saw it. A tiny black bear cub, no older than a few weeks, lay curled beside a fallen log. Its paw was twisted in wire, a cruel, rusted trap. Blood stained the leaves beneath it, and its sides rose and fell with rapid, frightened breaths. Ava froze. Everything she knew screamed at her to turn around. Leave it. Call someone. Walk away. But the cub looked at her, not with the wild panic of a feral animal, but something else. Pain, fear, helplessness. Ava dropped to her knees, hands trembling. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub flinched as she reached into her backpack, pulling out the multi-tool her father had given her years ago. It took 10 minutes, 2 prayers, and more courage than she thought she had. But the wire finally snapped. The cub didn't run, it just stared. She wrapped it in her jacket and whispered, "I'll take care of you, little one." She had no idea what she had just begun. Ava didn't take the cub straight into town. She knew better. The wildlife laws were strict, and she didn't trust that authorities would understand. They'd put him down or cage him for life. So instead, she brought him home. Her grandmother's old cabin, tucked at the edge of the forest, became a sanctuary. She named him Cody. At first, Cody was scared of every noise, every shadow. He would whimper at night and curl beside the wood stove, wrapped in Ava's blankets. She nursed him back to health with raw goat's milk and a mash of berries, fish, and ground oats. Days turned into weeks, and the cub slowly began to trust her, nudging her with his wet nose, tugging playfully at her shoelaces, and rolling over for belly scratches. She kept him hidden from the world, avoiding hikers, dodging drones, and refusing visitors. Cody grew fast, his paws clumsy and oversized, his body full of energy. He'd chase falling leaves, wrestle tree branches, and often try to mimic Ava's movements, pawing at the broom when she swept, or following her hand when she painted. But the bond ran deeper than mimicry. It was the way he watched her, not just like a pet, but as if trying to understand her emotions. One night, Ava wept over an old photograph of her parents. Cody padded over, leaned into her side, and stayed there without moving. He didn't need words. He had already chosen her as his person. It had been nearly 4 months since Ava found Cody. The cub was no longer tiny. He was growing fast, strong, confident, but still he never strayed far from her side. While most bears his age would be learning to hunt and survive in the wild, Cody had found his entire world in a cabin and a woman who treated him like family. But one night changed everything. It started with distant howls, not from wolves, but men, shouting, engines rumbling. Ava looked out the window and saw flashlights weaving through the woods. Trespassers, poachers. She quickly doused the lights and signaled Cody to stay low. Her heart pounded. They weren't just hunting animals. They were on her land. Cody sensed her fear, and for the first time she saw something shift in him. His playfulness vanished. He stood tall, body tense, eyes burning with silent warning. Then came the knock, loud, angry. "We saw your lights. You hiding something in there, lady?" Ava didn't answer. The door shook with a bang. "Open up or we'll—" A low, deep growl echoed from the shadows behind her. Cody emerged from the corner, not the clumsy cub she once rescued, but a young protector. He stepped between her and the door, teeth bared. Ava whispered, "Cody, no." But it was too late. The door burst open, and what those men saw made them freeze. A black bear, upright and snarling, standing guard over a woman who didn't flinch. The poachers didn't fire. They didn't speak. They ran, and from that night on, word spread, there was a bear in those woods, and he would growl at anyone who got too close to her. Ava thought that would be the end of it, but word spread fast in the nearby town, whispers of a wild bear protecting a woman deep in the forest. At first, it sounded like myth. Some dismissed it as backwoods nonsense, but then a blurry photo surfaced, taken by one of the fleeing poachers. It showed Cody standing tall in the cabin doorway, his massive form unmistakable. The photo went viral. Reporters showed up, drones buzzed overhead, wildlife officers came knocking. Ava tried to deny it, but it was useless. The world had found out. The state issued a formal warning. Harboring a wild animal was illegal. Cody would be taken, relocated, possibly euthanized if deemed dangerous. Ava pleaded, cried, begged. She showed them everything: his diet, the veterinary care, his gentle nature, the way he'd never harmed a soul. They saw the bond. They saw how Cody responded to her voice like a trained dog, how he leaned into her touch, how he growled, but never attacked when strangers came too close. One officer, a quiet woman named Reyes, watched Cody closely. "He's not just tame," she said. "He's loyal." Still, laws were laws, but the public had fallen in love with the story. Support poured in, petitions, phone calls, donations. "Let Ava Keep Cody" became a national headline. Finally, under intense pressure, the authorities agreed to a compromise. Ava could keep Cody, but only under strict wildlife sanctuary regulations. She had to build an enclosure, obtain permits, submit to monthly inspections, and continue working with professionals. Ava agreed without hesitation, because Cody wasn't just a bear, he was family, and she would fight for him, just like he'd fought for her. Cody's new enclosure wasn't a cage. It was a sanctuary, acres of forest fenced in, complete with a creek, climbing logs, and even a cave Ava built by hand. She spent every penny of her savings to meet every regulation. Volunteers came to help. Donations poured in. The world was watching, but Ava didn't care about fame. She only cared about Cody. And Cody? He never left the fence line unless Ava was nearby. There were other bears now, some rescued, some relocated. But Cody ignored them. He waited every morning by the gate, eyes scanning the path, ears twitching for the sound of her boots. When Ava visited, Cody would rumble happily, pressing his huge head into her chest like a dog seeking affection. He still played like a goof, rolling in the dirt, swatting at her scarf, trying to sit on her lap as if he hadn't grown 300 pounds. But there was one thing that never changed: his protectiveness. Once a new handler raised his voice at Ava, just frustration, nothing more. But Cody heard it. He let out a growl so deep, so primal, the ground itself seemed to tremble. Everyone froze. Ava calmly placed her hand on Cody's shoulder and whispered, "It's okay." Cody stopped instantly. Not because he had to, because he trusted her. To the world, he was a bear. To her, he was her guardian. And to Cody, Ava was the only home he ever knew. Cody didn't speak. He couldn't say thank you, or I love you, or don't go. But he didn't have to. Every moment with Ava was a language all its own. When she was sad, Cody would nuzzle his head against her side until she smiled again. When she laughed, he'd rumble in response, a deep, contented sound that echoed like thunder through the trees. On cold nights, he would lay close by, body warm, eyes half closed, listening to her stories as if he understood every word. Sometimes Ava would just sit with him, her hand resting on his thick fur, and cry, not because she was sad, but because something about Cody made her feel everything more deeply. Grief, love, peace. She had lost her parents in a car crash just 2 years before she found him. After that, silence had been her only companion. But with Cody, silence wasn't empty. It was full of meaning. He never needed a leash, never wandered far, because Cody didn't stay for the food. He stayed for her. People called it impossible, said a wild bear couldn't form emotional attachments, that it was projection, fantasy. But those people had never seen the way Cody watched Ava like she was the sun rising. They'd never seen him stand guard outside her cabin all night long. They hadn't heard the soft growl he made when strangers came too close. That wasn't instinct. It was loyalty. It was love. Raw, wordless, and unbreakable. It happened without warning. One autumn afternoon, while Ava tended to the back trail fence, a hiker wandered too close. He ignored the signs, crossed into restricted space, and startled Cody, who had been resting under the trees. Cody rose, massive and imposing, and let out a warning growl that shook the woods. The hiker froze, then panicked and ran, screaming for help. By nightfall, the headlines were everywhere. Woman keeps dangerous bear as pet. Near attack in unauthorized sanctuary. Officials came knocking, this time not with questions, but with orders. Cody would be taken, relocated, possibly destroyed. Ava stood between them and her bear, heart racing, tears burning. He didn't attack, she said. He warned. He protected. But the law didn't care. Her voice cracked as they loaded Cody into the transport cage. She whispered through the bars, "Don't forget me." And from inside, Cody let out the softest growl. He never did. The cabin felt hollow without him. Days blurred, nights stretched forever. Ava tried to move on, but every rustle outside made her heart leap, hoping, praying. Then one evening, as snow kissed the treetops, she heard it. A growl, low, familiar. She ran outside, breath caught in her throat. There he was, Cody, standing at the edge of the woods, bigger, stronger, but with the same eyes. He had found his way back. No cage, no leash, just choice. And he had chosen her. Again, Ava fell to her knees. He approached gently and wrapped her in silence. From that day forward, Cody returned often, not as a pet, but as a silent sentinel of the woods. Locals whispered of a giant black bear who watched over a girl in the forest. No one dared approach her cabin without her say-so. Not because of fear, but respect. Ava lived a quiet life, but never alone. Cody was always near, a shadow in the trees, a low growl in the night when danger crept too close. She had saved a cub once, and now that cub guarded her world, fiercely, loyally, endlessly.